Mistakes are part of any learning process. However, many players in Siege are making the same mistakes every match without even noticing. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you 18 mistakes that every Siege player is making. The first one being not droning or going AFK in the prep phase. The prep phase is the most important time of any given round because it's the time that you get to set up the bomb site and create your strategy on the defense, and it's the time on the attack where you get to drone out the enemy team setup and form a plan around their setup. If you sit AFK during this process and scroll on TikTok, you're going to put your team at a significant disadvantage because you're not going to have the proper information on what the enemy team is doing, and on the defense you're not going to have enough time to set up all your utility or to place all the reinforcements and site rotations that you need, which could very well end up throwing the round for your team. This is extraordinarily common in ranked. There are a lot of people who just go AFK and sit on their phone during the prep phase, especially on attack, and it's one of the biggest things that hold a lot of people back. And speaking of needing to drone in the prep phase, another common mistake that I see a lot of players make when it comes to how they react to intel is refusing to switch operators. If you drone out the enemy team's operators on the attack and you know that they're bringing a lot of counters to whatever you're wanting to do, for example, let's say you're picking Brava and they're bringing a Mute and a Mozzie, a lot of time players won't switch off anyways because they just want to play the operator they selected at the start of the prep phase. However, this is not how you should be playing ranked, because on the attack you want to be adapting to whatever the defense is bringing. You want to change your operators up so that way you can counter whatever the defense is trying to do, and so that you can avoid a lot of the enemy team's gadgets without having to spend a whole lot of time getting around them. But if you just pick an operator at the start of the prep phase and then never switch off that operator, whether the enemy team brings a lot of counters or not, you're going to end up putting your team at a disadvantage. You're going to end up wasting an operator slot when you could have went someone that would have been a lot more useful for your team. This is especially an issue in solo queue where a lot of players will just pick whatever operator they're the most comfortable with and just run that every single round. Try to avoid this if absolutely possible. Try to actually drone out the bomb site in the prep phase and figure out what the enemy team is bringing and then adapt your operator selection accordingly. Speaking of droning in the prep phase, the third mistake of the video that is exceptionally common, especially in lower ranks, is donating drones in the prep phase. A lot of the time the attackers will drive all of their drones into the bomb site without even thinking and just start scanning defenders, eventually resulting in their drones getting shot. This is the worst way to play the prep phase on the attack. You want to try to avoid getting your cam shot so that you can use them later in the round to drone out important areas of the map and to allow you to gather more intel. They'll be much more effective that way. So during the prep phase, you want to drive your drones into the bomb site, try to get a little bit of information here and there, and then try to sneak out once your drone gets spotted. If you just drive straight at defenders and start red pinging them, you're just going to get your drone shot and end up hurting your team's drone economy later in the round. I'm sure we've all experienced that situation late round where we wish we had an additional drone so that way we could drone out the bomb site to get some information, but we're all out of them. And this is one of the leading causes of that. So try not to get too cocky with your drones in the prep phase. And the fourth and final mistake related to the prep phase is not placing down all your utility. On defense, it's extraordinarily common to see some of your teammates later in the round having a couple pieces of utility still in their pocket. For example, Jaeger might have an additional ADS in his pocket, or your teammate might not have placed all of his barbed wire down. And this is just bad for your team overall. And a lot of the time, the reason why defenders do this is because they want to go on their roam or because they want to make it to their spawn peak in time, so they just decide to neglect placing all their utility down. This is just bad. If you don't have enough time to place all your utility down and to execute whatever plan you had going into the round, you should prioritize getting your utility down over that plan, because every extra bit of utility that you can place down for your team is going to be beneficial to them. So if you really wanted to spawn peak in that round, but you have an additional set of barbed wire in your pocket, just place the barbed wire down and don't go for the spawn peak. It's really not worth the risk of dying and not getting that crucial utility down. And after that, a common mistake I see a lot of players make when it comes to making callouts is doing too much of what I like to call on ping callouts. Basically what this is when a teammate hops on a drone or on a default camera and they just start yellow pinging the area of where the attackers are, and they say the attackers are pushing on ping, and then they just ping that location. These are terrible callouts because they are confusing and horribly inaccurate. This is because yellow pings are obviously very static, so the enemy team can move far away from your ping before your teammate's able to react to your callout, and it also forces your team, when you make a callout, to start looking around the map for your ping, which means that your callout is now causing your teammates to have to look in the direction of your ping to actually gather that intel. Whereas if you just made an audio callout of the location, like for example, there's a guy walking up rafters, your entire team can know exactly where that is on the map without having to look around, which is much more efficient. It gets the information across a lot more effectively, and it's a lot more accurate than a call out that's just someone's on ping. And speaking of making call outs on cameras, another thing that you should try to avoid is sitting AFK after you die. A lot of time you'll see players in rank just sit and spectate their teammates after they die instead of actually getting on the cameras, or even worse, they'll just hop on TikTok and not pay attention into anything that's going on. As soon as you die, you're not out of the fight yet. You need to be on cams to give your team information, because you never know what you could miss by not watching the cameras. You could miss out on a defender walking up a crucial flank by not watching the cameras, or you could miss vital information on a Valkyrie camera that could have given your team the win. You want to be on cameras constantly scrolling through them and watching them to make for sure that you don't miss out on any information that could be important to your teammates that are currently alive. Now, another common mistake that I see a lot when it comes to the philosophy of a lot of players in Siege is them believing in the idea of operator mains. Basically, what this means is that they'll pick 1 or 2 operators and they'll just play those operators constantly, and they'll never play anyone else because they consider those operators to be their mains. And this is horrible for 2 main reasons. First, it makes you much less versatile. So if the enemy team brings a lot of counters to you, like I mentioned earlier, then you're basically going to be screwed, because then the only operator that you're comfortable with playing has been heavily countered, and it makes you play worse if that operator is banned. This is why you should try to play a large range of operators to not only flesh out your skills, but to also make yourself less reliant on one operator. So that way, if they do get banned, or if the enemy team does bring a lot of counters to them, you can easily switch off to any other operator on the Siege roster and you'll be a-okay. So try to avoid the idea of an operator main and try to have at least 5 operators on each side that you're comfortable with playing consistently, especially in lower ranks. And as you climb the ranks, the amount of operators you're going to need to know how to play is going to grow substantially. Now, speaking of learning things, another issue that a lot of players have in Siege is not learning all of the maps. A lot of players, when a new map will come out or when a map gets reworked, they'll just refuse to learn the map because they don't enjoy it or because they don't think it's a balanced map. However, this is a horrible way to go about it, because you need to have a basic understanding of how to play every map in Siege, even if you're not a big fan of them. This is because you'll be at a massive disadvantage if you don't understand how to play every map in Siege, because the moment that a map that you don't like goes through, you're basically going to be screwed and guaranteed to lose the match. So try to at least learn the basics of every map, so that way if a map that you don't like does go through, you at least have a fighting chance. And speaking of giving your team a fighting chance, something that will hurt your team in that regard is getting mad at them. A lot of players in ranked will get extremely mad at their teammates and just start blaming them for losing the round. Blaming teammates, whether you're right for it or wrong, will just make them play worse, and it will also hurt the morale of your team and will make it less likely that you'll actually be able to turn things around. And this also causes you to never learn. If you're constantly blaming your teammates for every round and getting mad at them, you're never going to realize the mistakes that you make throughout the rounds, and you're just going to hyper focus on what your teammates do. This is how people get hard stuck in Siege, and it's been one of the biggest problems plaguing the gaming industry as a whole. So try to avoid it if absolutely possible. I understand emotions get heated sometimes, but just try to keep it to yourself so that way you can hopefully keep your chances of winning alive. Another thing that will really kill your chances of winning is being worried about your KD. This is another psychological issue that a lot of players have in pretty much every FPS game, but in Siege especially. What'll happen is they'll start performing really poorly, or after the season resets, they'll notice that they have a really bad KD after their first couple placement matches, and it'll start getting in their head. And they'll be constantly worried in every single match about performing well, so that way they can get their KD back up to par. This will just result in additional stress, and it will make you play significantly worse, because you'll no longer be positioning yourself in the best manner to win the round. You'll instead be positioning yourself in the best way to get kills, and you'll be prioritizing your own KD over your team winning the round. Also, the additional stress can cause you to end up whiffing gunfights that you otherwise wouldn't have whiffed if you were just in a normal mindset. And Siege is about strategy and working as a team at the end of the day. That is all that matters. Do not get hyper focused on your KD, even if it's something you're subconscious about, and even if other people make fun of you for it. At the end of the day, if you're winning matches and you're ranking up, that's all that really matters. Now, a really bad habit that a lot of players pick up from other FPS games that I've discussed many times throughout other videos: players reloading too often. In Siege, since we have one-shot headshot, you do not need to reload super often. If you have over 8 bullets in your magazine, you should be fine to take a gunfight against one player. And you should try to avoid reloading over that threshold, because reloading leaves you vulnerable to being swung by an enemy. And if you get caught reloading, there isn't reload canceling anymore, so you're basically guaranteed to die. This is why, unless you absolutely are certain that you're safe to reload, you shouldn't do so unless it's absolutely necessary. And another mistake that goes hand in hand with this is mag dumping barricades. This is common on the attack. When a player wants to open a barricade, they'll just start shooting bullets into the barricade until it gets destroyed. And when you do this, you're just asking to get swung by a defender and give them a free kill. Because when you're mag dumping into a barricade, a defender knows that you're going to be out of ammo when the barricade is done, and that you're going to go to reload. And as soon as you go to reload, a defender can very easily run out of the barricade that you just opened and get a free kill on you. This is especially applicable if you're by yourself without any teammates nearby. This is why in most situations you should try to melee barricades, so that way the defenders can't pull that off. If you're shooting a barricade from behind cover, then it's a different story, but in situations where that isn't the case, you should absolutely avoid it. And the mistake that you'll see a lot on the defense is having too many players play off or on the bomb site. This typically happens when teams are communicating very well with each other. either because they're not stacked or because they're relatively new to the game. But in Siege, you need to have the right amount of anchors or roamers to prevent yourself from allowing the attack to rush the site and to stop them from being able to take map control for free. This is why typically you want to have 3 anchors and 2 roamers, because your 2 roamers can play off the bomb site and slow the attackers down from being able to execute onto the site, and your 3 anchors can stop the attackers from just folding in on the site immediately, and they can stop them later in the round from actually taking the site and getting the plant down. This lineup can be adjusted slightly depending on the map and the bomb site, because certain sites and certain maps have different requirements, but generally, without going into too much detail, this is a good guideline to follow when positioning your teammates and when picking operators. And speaking of being off site, a big mistake when it comes to roaming that a lot of people make is staying off site for way too long. A lot of time players will stay roaming off site and just sit in a corner, and even when their teammates are dying on the bomb site, they'll just wait and hope to pull off a flank and get a few kills. And this will lose you games. And if you're a player that finds yourself in clutch situations a lot, especially when you're roaming, you're likely in those situations because you're playing way too long off the bomb site. You should always try to rotate back to the site when your anchors are calling out that they're getting pressured, and especially when you start seeing anchors dying on the site. And when it comes to overtime in your ranked games, something you should avoid doing is being too stagnant. If you notice that the enemy team holds a bomb site a certain way and is destroying you, or vice versa, then you should change your attacking strategy or defensive setup to counter their strategies. This especially applies in overtime, because if you've made it to overtime, typically you're going to know how the enemy team likes to play certain bomb sites and how they like to attack certain sites. And you can use the previous rounds you faced against them to create a blueprint that you can counter them with. Moving utility around, placing your deployable shields on the other side of the site, attacking the bomb site from a completely different angle. All of these things can catch your enemy off guard and can allow you to pick up wins on bomb sites that you weren't able to do before overtime. But a lot of players just don't do this, and when they get into overtime, they'll just play the bomb site the exact same way they did in the normal game, and will just result in overtime playing out the exact same way. Try to avoid this at all costs and try to make changes to adapt to what your enemy is doing. And a mistake you'll see a lot in positioning, especially in the newer seasons, is enemies revealing their own position with a laser sight. Laser sight in the recent seasons has become really popular because it makes your ADS speed a whole lot faster, but it comes with the downside of obviously projecting a laser out onto the wall where you're aiming at. This can allow the enemy to see where you're aiming and pre-fire your exact location. This is why when holding angles with the laser sight, you want to hold the angle slightly off so that way your laser isn't projecting onto the wall. This will prevent your enemies from being able to see your laser sight and then pre-fire you immediately, which will save yourself in a lot of gunfight. And another thing that'll save you in a lot of gunfights is running less often. A lot of times you'll see players, especially those who come from other FPS games, running around the map constantly, and they very rarely ever are ADS. This is the completely opposite way of how you should be playing Siege. It's because it puts your gun away and it makes more noise, which gives the enemies opportunities to hit gunfights against you while you are vulnerable. Instead, you should be ADSing 99% of the time when you're walking around the map in Siege. The only times that you shouldn't be ADSing is when you're running in areas of the map that you're absolutely certain the enemy is not in, or when you need to make rotates in a pinch because the time is running low. Outside of that, you should have your gun up ready to take a gunfight at any moment, because you never know when a defender could pop out of the woodwork, and you want to be ready to take a gunfight against them. And the 18th and final mistake of this video that happens way too often is when you or your teammates plant too quickly. A lot of time on the attack, you'll see players get control of the bomb site, and even when their team is nowhere even near them or able to defend them, they'll start planting the diffuser down right in the site. This is a way to just donate around to the defense, because you're putting your teammates in a horrible position. If you die, the defense can very easily retake the bomb site since there's no one else around to contest them, and they can just start hopping on that diffuser. And then the rest of your team is basically going to be forced to funnel into the bomb site and try to kill the defenders before they can defuse. This makes the defense's job a whole lot easier. Whereas if you were to just wait for your teammates to rotate over and help cover you while you're getting that diffuser down, you're A, less likely to die while planting, and B, you'll be way more likely to hold that diffuser in the post plant. So try not to plant the diffuser until your teammates are actually in position, and try to communicate to them so that way you're certain that they're ready for you to put the diffuser down when you do. Anyways, that about wraps up today's video. If you've made one of these mistakes before, or if you found me going over these mistakes useful, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed today's video, I make these content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.